Welcome, everybody. We're here at the Aquarian Pearls interviews with the prominent people in the pearling world, and we're very honored today to meet with Andy Muller in Japan. I first met Andy in 1982 in my teacher, Mr. Jerwood's office, January of 1982, when Andy came to buy like $1 million, which is called 100 oku, 100 million yen of pearls from my boss. I was straight out of boarding school and hadn't really seen much of the pearl business except in my dad's office in London. And my dad, Boris Norman, was a friend of Andy's for a long time in Andy's career as boss of Gole Bushel, Japan. And they were together in the famous Burma auctions with some of the big names that we'll talk about today. So welcome, Andy. So great to be with you and have you with us. And I'm going to start off asking you where you grew up and how you got into the business and how you became a pearl man.
Hello, David. Thank you. Good to see you. So where shall I start? Well, I was born in a rather small village in Switzerland in 1947. And I've had a good upbringing in a very simple, solid, middle-class family. One elder brother, one elder sister, and my father was he was the income. He brought back his salary every month. What we call in Japan, he was a salary man, and my mother at that time, typical traditional solid housewife, did all the chores, and I think I had a nice and happy and healthy and solid upbringing and environment. And then you asked me why I came into pearls. Well, I grew up in this village. I went to school, and finally I had to look for a job. And already when I was very small, I had somehow the intention or the ambition to go to Asia. Don't ask me why, but for me, Asia was my target. So I was looking for any kind of company that would have offices in Asia that would give me the opportunity to go to Asia. It could have been anything, furniture or chemicals or food or shoes, but it happened that I met this company called Gole Bushel, which at that time was the largest import and distributor of cultured pearls in Europe.
Of course, Andy, and how old were you when you had your yearning to go to Asia? Were you a teenager?
Oh, already at that time, I wrote in an essay once when I was in elementary school already. I wrote that I want to go abroad.
So considering it was going to be, you ended up marrying a Japanese lady, living your whole life in Asia. It was like in your DNA to come back to Japan somehow, like a past life thing or something.
It was more kind of adventurous. I was going to go to Asia for a few years and then come back to Switzerland. But then once I had reached the point of no return, so I stayed. But anyway, I happened to meet this fantastic company, Gole Bushel, which besides many other divisions had this pearl division into which I was sent in 1968. I was working there for 3 months.
And they were the biggest pearl importer into Europe of cultured pearls, right?
There was a big competitor in Germany, Schöffel, but Gole Bushel and Schöffel were the biggest, very prominent and very solid also.
Yes.
So in 1969, the company sent me to the Hong Kong office. So I first went to Hong Kong in 1969, and in Hong Kong I had a fantastic boss. I learned a lot from him, and he was also very patient with the greenhorn that I was at that time. And then he said, "What do you know about pearls?" I said, "I don't know so much." So he was having the fantastic idea of sending me to Kobe, Japan already in 1969 for a training of 4 months, which I did. And then I went back to Hong Kong, and I was living in Hong Kong until the end of 72, when I came back to Japan. And in those days, the business was totally different, quite different from what we see it today.
So, it was a booming time, you could say, for cultured pearls.
The cultured pearls were the new kid on the block.
Yes.
And of course, we had a market which was a total seller's market, whereas today we have a buyer's market.
And in the seller's market, you had people like Grace Kelly, Princess Grace of Monaco, Marilyn Monroe wearing cultured pearls. the GIs went back from the Second World War with pearls to America. So it was a sort of new market in many ways in the 60s, 70s, 80s, wasn't it?
And then especially the South Sea pearls, when the South Sea pearls came up, they were also the new kid on the block.
Yes.
A big shortage. So it was a seller's market, and we buyers, we were desperate to get hold of these goods. So we traveled, and we traveled already end of the 70s to Australia, to Indonesia, and to Burma. I went 1972 for 20 consecutive years. The Burmese auction was the biggest at that time. Actually, in the 70s, it was the only auction in the world. There was no other South Sea pearl auction than the one in Burma, which is.
And how long did it go for? Did you go and live in Myanmar, in Rangoon, for a few weeks?
The tourists got a 7-day visa, but we as pearl traders, we got a 14-day visa, because this is quite amazing. The total harvest of the total Burmese auction at that time was only 6 khan. When you consider this, 6 khan, it was the only auction in the world.
That means, Andy, for people watching who are not understanding Khan, that means 6,000 momi, maybe
6,000 momi, 1 momi.
10,000 pearls, maybe?
I tell you, let me think. 6,000 times 3.75 kilogram, this is 22.5 kilo at that time. This is nothing compared to today. Today, when I talk about Burma auction, 6 khan, today we have maybe 30 auctions all over the world per year, and each auction has 20, 30, even 40 khan. So it is completely proportional.
And one khan means about 1,200 pearls, if you had to call it by number of pearls. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And Andy, what was it like in the Burma auction? Did you all live in the same hotel and eat meals together, and all the important people from the whole world business would sit around chatting and talking and playing cards and whatever you guys do, drinking Scotch whiskey, having a good time?
Yeah, everybody was in the India Lake Hotel, of course, surrounded by the army, and the invitation was for the Burma Gems, Jade and Pearl Emporium. This was the name. And the funny thing was that at that time, the name Myanmar, the country was not called Myanmar. The official invitation was sent to us by the revolutionary government of the Socialist Republic of the Union.
Wow.
This was the official name of the country. The name Myanmar only came later, but we had at that time the word Myanmar without the R at the end. This was the MPE, the Myanmar Pearl Enterprise, who organized this auction.
Fantastic. And so you'd all be together, and the auction, was that through a piece of paper in a ballot box, or did you hold up a stick?
No, the auction was, it was auctioned off lot by lot, not like today, for example. It was off lot number 1. Are there any bids for lot number 1? And you would raise your ballot paper.
Yes.
An officer would come and he would check your bid, whether it's correct or not. At least the minimum price must be there, and then he would put it into urn, and then he would say, are there any more bids for lot number such and such? And then, of course, the bids would slowly be collected and put into the urn. And after, the auctioneer would say, if there are no more bids for lot number such and such, bidding for lot number such and such is closed. Boom. And then they would open the urn and they would see who is the highest bidder, and they would announce the company name and the price at which the lot was sold.
Fantastic.
Now imagine how long this takes. Nowadays, the auctioning is completely different. We have an auction which is at least 3, 4, 5, 6 times bigger. We conduct in 2 days.
Amazing difference. But there was more time for life in those days. It was kind of more pleasant. And you know, I remember going to Japan and writing a letter once a month to my parents, an aerogram, and sending it. And it was nice to be in a slower way of life. Like my child, Genevieve, my younger daughter, said to me one day, hey, Dad, what happened at boarding school when you gave in your mobile phone? How did you survive? And I said, they weren't invented yet. So she said, well, how did you meet people? And I said, you said you'd meet them at the museum or the station and you'd turn up. But it was a totally different life, in those days. And Andy, who were some of the great names of the business that were with you in that time, and the characters you remember from the Burma times? Because you guys, as well as going to the Burma auction, you would have traveled to French Polynesia and been the first people buying Tahitian cultured pearls. And you're a chevalier d'honneur, right? You're like a knight, Sir Andy, because of the business you've done in Tahiti.
Let's go back to Burma first. Okay?
Yes, sir. I'm all over the place.
In Burma, for example, also what is today unimaginable, for example, was the way of payment. How did we pay the goods? Because we were there and we had a budget, we bought the goods, and we wanted to take the goods out of the country with us physically to take back to Hong Kong. So what we did before we went to Burma, we went to our bank in Hong Kong, the Bank Indo Suez, and we asked them to give us traveler's letter of credit, which are basically banker's checks. And we would have 2 of them issued for $100,000, and then we would have maybe 2 issued for $50,000 each. Then we would have 20, 10,000. So we had traveler's letter of credit, bank checks. And when we had finished the auction, of course, we had to go and count the goods in front of the officers. And then the goods were sealed. And then it was maybe 11 or 12 o'clock at night when we said, okay, here is the money. And we paid them. And then they said, when is your flight? I said, tomorrow morning early. They said, okay, what we have to do now is we have to send 2 people here from the hotel. The bank was in the hotel room. At midnight, they had to send 2 people by bicycle to the central bank in Rangoon to get the signature books. They had to get the books to verify that the signatures on the checks corresponded with the signatures which they had on their books.
Amazing.
Then by maybe 1 o'clock in the morning, they would come back and they would verify that these traveler's checks were authorized or authenticated, and then we could get the goods and they would release the goods. That's how the term is.
Amazing, isn't it? Wow. And Andy, who are the names that spring to mind for you from that era?
Well, of course, we had the big shooters from America. By alphabetical order, it was Assael and Mastroeni. Of course, Salvador Assael and Frank Mastroeni and Eddie Mastroeni, his brother. And maybe Frank came also once. And then you had in Europe, you had Mr. Salzman, of course, from
Samurai in Geneva, yes.
From Germany, you had Mr. Klingel. And then we had, of course, some Italians, and
yes,
we were always the same group together. We had breakfast together, lunch together, dinner together, and we had quite a free allowance in bringing in food, for example. So
yes,
many times we had a picnic in the evening. Somebody had brought cheese or salami and a bottle of wine, and
great.
It was fun. It was fun.
And nice to be with the people in the business. They're competitors, but compatriots. It's nice.
I think we were about a group of 25, 30 people.
Yes. And Andy, when did you first go and buy pearls in French Polynesia in Tahiti?
1977.
1977. And was it very small production then?
The production was very small, but at that time we had 2 very large producers. One was Robert Wan with Tahiti Pearls, and the other one was Jean-Claude Brouillet, who had Polynesia Pearl. And these were the 2 giants.
Yes.
And then and I remember very well because we could not have access to Jean-Claude Brouillet's Polynesia Pearls because he had a contract with Assael in New York, who in turn again was well integrated in the market. So
yes.
we bought from Robert Wan. But then in 1984, I believe, Robert Wan bought Jean-Claude Brouillet's farm, including the island of Marutea Sud in the Gambia. And that means Robert won at that time, he had a market share after having bought Bruye, he had a market share of, I think, 60 to 70%. He was the dominant producer in French Polynesia, not only quantity-wise, also quality-wise.
Yes. And you received the Chevalier Légion d'Honneur, a knighthood, an honorary knighthood for being the largest buyer of pearls from Tahiti in history, really.
Well, you know, I got the Chevalier after 20 years. So I got 1977 and 21 years, actually 1997. I got the Chevalier. I was the first pearler to get the Chevalier because we had spent at that time, I had maybe 60 trips to Tahiti in the 20 years, about 60 trips to Tahiti, and probably more than $100 million of purchase. So I was honored by the French president, Polynesian president, Gaston Floss, to receive here my little...
Your Légion d'Honneur. You have to go up a bit so we can see it better. Can you raise it? There we go. Salut.
Okay.
Fabulous. Sir Andrew. Sir Andy.
Very good memories of Tahiti. So
fantastic, Andy. Oh, that's beautiful. Sir Andy Muller. And Andy, do you remember the most expensive pearl you ever bought in Tahiti? Or are there too many?
Well, usually, you know, you didn't buy just one pearl. It was very seldom that you would buy one pearl.
To get to $100 million, I expect you bought a few more.
Yeah. I have good memories and very good episodes also, but I don't want to embarrass anybody, so it's better maybe to keep quiet about that.
But you bought, in your time, you would have bought the largest. Like nowadays, what's happened to Tahiti, Andy? Why are all the pearls today? In your day, you had really big pearls like you're wearing, but today everything is 8, 9, 10 millimeters. And can you explain why they're so small? Well, and remember that people, Andy, a lot of the people watching our interview are from the public and don't know what we know as insiders in the business. But everyone asks me, why are the pearls so small? Where are the big pearls, especially in the American market, which grew up with larger pearls?
Okay, when we talk about big, let me quickly go back and be a little bit humble, because you said we were the biggest, which is not actually true. We were a group of about 6 customers worldwide, including us in America, us in Japan, and this 6 were the largest wholesalers. We, by ourselves, we were among the largest wholesalers. And we went every year 2-3 times to Robert I, and everybody had kind of an allocation, and it was a business which was done by arm's length bargaining several times per year, but they were big amounts. These were quite big amounts. And now to come back to the size of the pearls, of course, we have 3 types of oysters. The Japanese Akoya are the smallest ones. Then you have the Tahitian ones, which are medium, and you have the Pink Dada Maxima, the white lip, which is the largest one. Correspondingly, the Japanese Akoya are 2 to 9 or 10 millimeter. The Tahitian, this is very exceptional. This is up to 17 millimeter, which is the average size is maybe just below 10 millimeter nowadays. And then you have the big white lip South Sea pearls, which also go up to 20 millimeter. But why we can have smaller and bigger sizes depends, of course, on the demand. What is the demand? So the pearl farmer will insert smaller or bigger nuclei and grow the pearls larger or smaller. Smaller pearls usually are easier to make, also less expensive to make, less maintenance, and there's a lot of course, the price point. So
and at the moment, the farmers are leaving the oysters underwater a shorter time to make smaller pearls. Is that correct too, compared to when you were buying all those 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 millimeter pearls?
Yeah, of course, you know, to have these large pearls, you need second or third operation. You cannot, you start with a small nucleus in an oyster, and then after, let's say after 24 months, you open it, take from the pearl sac, take out the pearl, and put in a second nucleus, which is bigger or about the same size as the pearl which you took out now. So in the second operation, next 24 months, you have a rather larger pearl. and you can sometimes use the same pearl oyster, the same pearl sac to make even a third pearl. There's one phenomenon with the Tahitian pearls, contrary to the white-lid pearls. The Tahitian pearls, when you make second operation or third operation, usually they lose luster. So when you go to a wholesaler, to a negociant, to a farmer in Tahiti, and the buckets are on the table with all the raw materials, already from far away you can see whether it's first operation or second operation, not only because of the size, but also because of the luster.
Andy, you've been a pearl farmer. You've been involved too in pearl farms in Indonesia and Australia. You've been one of the biggest 6 buyers or the biggest buyer of Tahiti. What's it like you've been a trader, a seller, a farmer? What do you prefer, being a cultivator, the actual farmer who has all the risk of nature, or being an actual buyer and seller? Do you have a preference?
Today, I rather prefer to be a trader.
Yes.
There is that pearl farming is extremely difficult. It's extremely hard. It is also quite expensive. It is not what many people dream about. You know, they would like to be a pearl farmer. I was involved in pearl farming, and it didn't go too well, to be very honest.
And there's a lot of things can go wrong with weather and everything. I mean, it's a lot of people say, why do pearls cost quite a lot of money? But there's so much risk, and you need so much capital equipment and boats and aeroplanes and the tides and the sharks and nature. There's a lot you're contending with.
You are absolutely right. It's a very, very high risk. Pearl farming, I think all aquaculture, even fish farming, but especially pearl farming, it is extremely risky.
Yes. And in that way, Mr. Paspaley, for example, Nick Paspaley, I think you were one of the first people to buy Wanoku, or $1 million of pearls from in Darwin directly back in the day. And he has in many ways all the risk farming in all those really remote places with everything else, and keeps the price strong for everyone holding the stock, and does an amazing job in his own way.
Yeah.
And Andy, I must say as well, you're a published author that's the first 100 years, Cultured Pearls, Andy Muller. We've got you've been a writer, an author, a pearl man in so many ways. But can I talk to you about life in Japan? Because you had this real urge to go to Asia, right? As a child.
Just can I quickly
please?
You want quickly to talk about Australia to see how it was at that time compared. I compared Burma, for example.
Yes.
Now, let me quickly talk about Australia. I went to Australia in 1979 and met Paspaley's son Nick in Darwin. And then, among other things, Nick said, "Andy, do you want to see the pearl farm? We have 2 pearl farms north of Darwin. One is Port Bremer and the other is Port Essington." And I said, "Of course, Nick." So every day, at that time, there were no mobile phones. So every day at a certain time, we would have the moose and the ham radio. And we would radio at a certain time to the pearl farm, which were at that time also ready to talk.
Yes.
Then we would say, "Tomorrow afternoon, I'm coming with a visitor to your pearl farm. You be ready." Okay. So the next day, we drove by 4-wheel drive through the bush, through the desert, whatever, north of Darwin for quite many hours. And then we arrived at the peninsula, and Nick said, "Look, this island over there, that's where the pearl farm is." So what did we do? We gathered branches and leaves, and we made a fire to make smoke signals that they could see at the pearl farm that we have arrived, to come and pick us up by boat. That's
fantastic.
How we traveled to the pearl farm, and that's how we communicated at that time, even with smoke signals. So they came to pick us up.
Fantastic.
And the first thing they said, "We are running out of meat. We should, before sunset, we should go and hunt some pigs." So I was one of the 3. I was given an old 1911 carbine, I think, and we went for hunting, and we did indeed. We got a pig, so we had something to eat.
Fantastic. Not like going to the auction of Paspaley in Hong Kong now, where they provide all the meals and everything. We don't know how, but that was 1979.
Yeah.
Andy, isn't that fantastic? How great is that? That's 41 years ago.
Yeah, and you know what, David? At that time, as I said, we had to run. We had to run to the farmers to get the goods. Today, the farmers are sending the goods to Kobe or to Hong Kong. But at that time, we had to look who is producing. In Australia, of course, the oldest and biggest pearl farm was in Kuri Bay.
Yes.
Of Australia. And Kuri Bay, of course, was Nippo. And we couldn't get the goods in Australia from Kuri Bay. We had to go to Tokyo to Nippo. But there were three prominent producers in Australia at that time. I go in alphabetical order. It was Bruce Brown from Signet Bay,
yes,
Peninsula, in the northwest of in West Australia in the north. Then you had Dickie Morgan.
Yes.
Dickie Morgan in the Montebellos, and you had Pasquale in Darwin.
Yes.
And in 1979, 80, 81, it was my duty to get the pearls. But where do we get the pearls from? So I went many times. I went to see Nick in Darwin,
yes,
or Dick Morgan in the Montebellos, or I went to Bruce Brown. And to go to Bruce Brown was also an adventure. It was many hours through the Dampier Peninsula on a four-wheel drive through the bush. And when we arrived, there was a big gate. And on the gate it was written, "Never mind the dogs, beware of the owner." And there came Bruce Brown with the shotgun. He said, "What do you want? You like to buy pearls?" That's how it was.
Fantastic. And Bruce's son, James Brown, carries on the tradition, doesn't he, with Signet Bay Pearls, and has an amazing, like a tourist experience and a retail store, and still has the farm today, I think, in Broome.
Yes, in the Dampier, yes.
Andy, so you bought hundreds of millions of dollars of Australian pearls as well as Tahitian pearls and Indonesian pearls. So you've been through a few pearls in your time as a pearl trader. But tell us about Japan too. You're
right about that, David. But don't forget, I was also a salary man. I was also an employee. I was working diligently for a very good company. I was very happy to work. I was lucky to work for 33 years for Gole Büschel. It was a very interesting business. At that time, the management of that time, being in Hong Kong and Switzerland, they understood Asia, they understood the product. It was a very nice relationship. So I was very lucky to do that.
And what was your last year there before you started your own company? It was 2002, yes. And I've been lucky to trade with you in both places, at Gole Büschel and with Hinata Trading, I'm glad to say. And Andy, tell us, so you've always had a love affair with Asia. And you first went to Hong Kong and then to Japan. And when did you first get to Japan?
Well, first to Japan, I was sent by my boss in Hong Kong in 69, of course, 69 for 4 months I was living here. And I still have friends from that time, still pearl, and I'm very thankful to these people who taught me the ropes, the tricks of the trick. And then I went back to Hong Kong, and I was in Hong Kong until December 1972. That's when I took over the office year, 1st of January 73 for Gole Büschel. And I must say, I think I'm very, very lucky to live in Japan.
And you've been there since 1973?
Yes, of course.
And what's it like for our viewers who either have never been to Japan or been as a tourist? What's the difference that the people who seem to be able to live in Japan absolutely adore it so much?
We live in paradise. Japan is fantastic. The people are very nice. They're very honest, diligent, disciplined. Then, of course, we have a normal language, A, I, U, E, O, like we say A, B, C, D, E, or whatever, A, B, C, D, E, a normal language. We have 4 seasons, very important. We have the best food, not only the Japanese food, but also the Western food. I make any bet you eat better Italian food in Japan than in Italy, or French food in Japan than in France. We have fantastic food. No, life is really nice. And also, last but not least, there's not even no tipping. There's no tipping in Japan.
And there's no crime except organized crime.
Like this. It was $4.95, and you give 5. 500. Then you take back the 5 cents, you know.
Yes,
So there's no tipping in Japan also. It's fantastic. Life is here. It's good, especially now Corona. I always say we are prisoners of paradise.
Because nobody's coming in and nobody's going out. So you're like homogenous, like an homogenous society. Fantastic.
Yeah,
Fantastic. And of course, Andy, you have your beautiful wife, Yumi, who's Japanese. And so you've had your whole life there really as a grown-up, if I can call you a grown-up.
No, we are married for 41 years.
Fantastic. Congratulations.
We have 2 grandchildren.
Fantastic.
We have a good relationship. We see each other every week, and we have
lovely. Lovely. And you've been in Kobe, Japan all this time, haven't you? Yeah.
Yes. I was once for 6 after the earthquake in 1995. We had the big earthquake in Kobe with huge damage, and I had to be in Tokyo for 6 months after the earthquake. But otherwise, I was always based in Kobe.
Fantastic, fantastic. Andy, so when you look back at your career so far, I'm sure there's more to come, but is there any really outstanding moments or people that really spring to mind as either amazing characters or teachers or amazing events in the business, like the earthquake time was pretty special, I know, but that sort of thing?
You see, I used to go and work at the pearl farm of Clipper in Western Australia in Broome.
Yes.
And the first year we went there, the pearl farm was in Kwandong, just outside Cable Beach. And we used to be stationed on that little boat, the Lübeck trader. And every morning, the Japanese crew, which we had on board to operate, because July is seeding and harvesting time, harvest and seeding time. So we had 3 Japanese on board who were the technicians to operate the oysters. And every morning, very early, we got up very early, and with a dinghy, we had to go out to the long lines to catch the oysters, to get the oysters in their baskets to bring to the boat, that the Japanese could operate them. And the amazing thing was, every morning when we went out, it was just by sunrise, the whales. I've never seen so many whales, and we had to sometimes turn around the whales, and they came with, it was in the morning at sunrise, the whales playing in the water. It was full of whales. This was one of the most impressive things I ever experienced in this pearl business.
I think being close to a whale is one of the peak experiences of being a human being. I don't know what it is about whales, but I'm obsessed. I've got whale clothes and whale I love whales so much. I've even got my my whale keyring. But isn't that amazing, Andy? Now that's an experience, isn't it? It's so beautiful. And there's something about pearls coming from the water and connecting us to the moon and the tides and the water. Because whenever women wear pearls, they feel super enhanced. We sell a lot of pearls on television shows here and in America. And Charlie Barron, my nephew in England, who you taught the pearl business to, thank you, sir. He notices too that when the ladies put the pearls on, everybody's enhanced and feel more royal and more regal. And it's no coincidence. I think the pearls have been throughout the ages on royal families and movie stars and all the prominent politicians and people in the world, and we're very lucky, aren't we, to have made a living in this business, I think.
Now the next is the men have to wear pearls.
Yes.
I just was told by a customer in Europe that they sold 16mm pearls, 2 bracelets to a man. So I hope this is just the beginning.
There's a chap called Harry Styles, who's a very good-looking English man who was in a group called One Direction that my daughter loved once upon a time. And he wears pearls. And then they had the American, I think, the Music Awards last weekend. And one of the rappers called Machine Gun Kelly, he wore a white pearl necklace. So it's definitely starting with younger people. And, people used to think pearls were just for your grandmother, but now they're for absolutely everybody, we see, for sure. Andy, well, can I ask you one final question? That if you were to the people who are new, like Charlie, who's 25, and young people in the business and young people what would you say for some optimism for the future? After everyone's had a very difficult 2020, I think, and we've all come to December the 1st today, 2020, and I'm really happy that we've all made it so far, you know. But what would you say about the future of the pearl business as a final parting comment, or anything else you'd like to say?
What I would say to the pearl traders, the young ones, is if what you don't have in stock, you cannot sell. So you buy, no guts, no glory. Okay, go ahead and buy, be active. If you don't have the goods, you cannot sell.
So true.
Of course.
My teacher, Mr. Jerwood, who was your great friend when I got to Japan, he said to me, I said, what's the best pearl you've ever sold when I was 18? He said, nah, the one on the invoice, he said. That was his answer. Then his second saying was, the definition of a recession is when the customers who don't pay won't buy. That was his other great saying. And then he said about buying, there's no taste in nothing. Exactly what you said. He said, buy. Otherwise, there's no taste in nothing. It's so true. Well, Andy, thank you so much for being with us today. You are Sir Andy with the Légion d'Honneur, and you've been an enormous part of my life in the pearl business. So I just want to acknowledge you and tell you you're incredibly much appreciated. We've had so much fun over the years, and I'm sure when we all get to meet again in Japan or Hong Kong, or you come to Australia, we'll all be together for sure. So thank you so much. Big domo arigato.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much. Keep well.
All over, my dear. Thank you so much.
How was that?